Hello, everybody. This is Lynn Serafin from Trentino Genealogy. Today is Friday, the 7th of August, 2020. We've almost made it through the whole summer, believe it or not. And today is Filo Friday. I said I would be doing it a few weeks ago, but I was having a lot of problems with my larynx. As you can tell, I'm much better. Not perfect yet, so you may hear me get a little bit raspy. I had a rough time trying really hard not to make this podcast too long because I just don't want to get into a coughing fit. But at any rate, I'll give it a shot. And I think in the future, because I realize I'm actually really pretty busy, I'll probably be doing these on first Fridays of every month because that'll be easier to remember and it won't be as much pressure. One of the challenges I have in doing these things is that I need to somehow tie it into what I'm already working on, because otherwise I end up diverging and doing too many research projects. So what I've tried to do is tie in tonight's session with the ongoing book project that I'm working on surnames, and also on some of the more recent surnames that I've worked on various client projects. There was something else I wanted to say. Oh, my screen. A lot of you fed back to me, said you liked the screen, but somebody mentioned, I think it was Diane or somebody, I can't remember, said it looked a little claustrophobic. So what I've done is I pushed it back just a little bit so you can see my funky carpet on the ground, or it's a rug, it's not a carpet. But so that way you can get a little bit of color at least and see kind of a flower behind me and things. So at least I've got the backdrop, but it's not quite as stark and closed in, and it does feel more like a little office. So anyway, okay. So tonight, I'm saying tonight because here it's 8 o'clock in the evening, where it's probably the afternoon for many of you. First of all, as a reminder, philo, what the word philo means, it comes from the word for to spin, and it is kind of like a double meaning. It's a tradition in Trentino that people would sit around between dinner and bedtime and tell stories, kind of the same way we watch TV tonight or these days. But back then, it was a way of entertaining. It was a way of passing on oral history. It was a way of families coming together. And it was also even a physical means of staying warm in the winters, because they all huddle together and sometimes even get down into the in the bottom areas of the mountain homes where the cows and sheep and all of them work for the winter. So all those collected bodies, kept them warm in the winter. So philo, it has kind of a double meaning because it was the time when, traditionally, when women, I say women because they're the ones who did it, would spin their yarns, wool and things like that, flax, I suppose. And it was also the time of spinning tales. So that's what this is. So because we're all into genealogy, everything that I'm talking about is got to do with family history. But I'm going to try to weave stories in with it as well. Tonight, the theme that I have chosen, and you're going to see me looking at my notes because there's an awful lot tonight, is Trentino families who really got around. Now, what I mean by that is there are some families that pretty much stayed put in one place forever, but there are other families who either relocated completely, or more often one branch shifted to another place and started a whole new line there, where the surname just suddenly appears. And when we see things like that, it's really cool because genealogy-wise, if you know that a certain person arrived at a certain place at a certain time, you know that everybody descended from that couple or that person is related to you, and that's kind of cool. So I had some difficulty narrowing it down. I felt like I made my list way too long, as usual, because it's what I always do. So what I've done tonight is I've chosen 4. I hope I can get through all of those within, I said an hour, but hopefully I would rather spend about 45 minutes or so or less. But I've chosen 4 families. The reason why I've chosen these 4 families is they all have a connection, and kind of a peripheral connection, to a place called Fiave in Val Giudicarie. How many of you know where that is? How many of you have family there? How many of you have been there? It's a really nice place. Actually, it has some ancient palafitti, which are these petrified logs in peat there from an ancient village, like 5,000 years old, that was built on stilts, much in the same way that Venice, the city of Venice is, except that in Venice now it's all concrete and all. But these were villages that were built on peat bogs, so that partially for protection and also partially for, well, to keep the good arable land free. You know, why build a house on good farming land? You know, build it in the peat bog and keep the farming land for farming and grazing. That made sense to them. So there is actually a museum there in Fiave, and if you go there at the right time, you can see the sticks sticking out of the ground like that. When I went there, it had been raining a lot, so I only saw a few sticks and some turtles and things like that. But sometimes you can see really the remains of a whole village there. So Fiave, and it's Fiave with an accent, and I never know if it goes this way or that way because I see it both ways. But anyway, I have cousins there. Anyway, all the families I'm going to talk about tonight have a connection with Fiave in some way, but they are not originally from there. Okay, so that's the theme, all right? So these are families who got around, and where they got around to was Fiave and probably some other places as well. So that's what I'm going to be taking you on a journey tonight with that. So, as I said, I'm going to talk about 4 families. I'm not going to tell you who they are in advance so that you are in suspense. Now, the first one, I'm going to talk about them in alphabetical order, kind of because they fit together historically, talking about them in that way. The first family I mentioned a bit in the last call, but I didn't really talk about them in detail, and it's the family, the surname Alimonta. Now, there's a reason why I want to bring them up. I think they're really interesting. I also did a longer piece on them, which Daniel Cagliari from Giudicarie Storia actually translated into Italian and posted on his website. And now I'm thinking to give it to presented as a paper to the Accademia website in both English and Italian. I think it'd be kind of cool to have a paper up there on that. Anyway, they're a very interesting family because Alimonta means from Limonta. All right, it's a toponymic name. Now, Limonta is a place in Lombardia. All right, and in the records, when you see them in Trentino, it'll often say that they're from the province of Milan. It has a long name that you won't recognize, but it's much more complicated looking than Milan. But it actually refers to, says that they were from that area. So Alimonta, anybody with that name, means that they didn't come from Trentino, they came from somewhere else. They came from Limonta in Lombardia. Now the question is, does everybody in Trentino who has that surname, are they all descended from the same people? I can't answer that question tonight because I haven't found all the evidence yet, but there's a strong indication that they probably are. However, a few of the lines are, and I'm going to talk to you about those now. So now here, try to imagine they started off in Lombardia. Well, for me, it's over here on the left, and for you, it's over there. So they started in Lombardia. They come south. This is around the, when was it? Let me look at the dates again. It's the end of the 1600s, so 1675-ish, 1675, between 1675 1695 in that period of time. More than one family group. So it may have been 2 brothers or 3 brothers. We're not sure. This is why I'm not sure if they were all connected. And obviously they had to have been called something else other than from Limonta, unless that's something that they gained when they had shifted to another part of the province before they came to Trentino. But at any rate, around this period of time, we see them entering around the Lago di Garda, Lake Garda area, and very shortly after around Arco. Now, I haven't looked at the Arco records. I know that at least one of these people was born there, and I know that some people stayed there because there are other people like notaries who popped up. At some point I will research that more to find out more about that family who arrived around that time in Arco at the end of the 1600s. However, what I'm more going to talk about now are two men, probably brothers, but we don't know. And the reason why we don't know is there's a huge gap in the records in the parish where they're going to. And I already told you they're going to Fiave. There's a huge gap in the records, and it means we have to interpolate an awful lot. So anyways, two men named Francesco and Antonio from Lombardia, it says the province of Milan, but it's a different name of the province today. But anyway, from over there, sometime around the end of the 1600s, they came through Arco and then moved up to Fiave. And as I say, we know that there are two men who they arrived around the same time, so you kind of assume they've got to be related to each other, and they're roughly contemporary. Francesco is probably a little bit older, Antonio's probably a little bit younger. I gotta tell you right now, I'm descended from Antonio. Okay. Now, Francesco, they settled in Fiave, but Francesco had a couple of kids who did very well, a couple of sons who did very well. The Alimonta family, first of all, they were already rural nobility when they moved. We don't know any details about that, but they were already rural nobility. Around in the 1720s, two of the children of Francesco, two of the sons, married two heiresses from the Parolari family. Anybody got Parolari? Now, the Parolari were a noble family. They actually owned a pharmacy in the area in Campo LOMASO, or used to be called Campo Maggiore. It's very old. We don't even know how old it is. It was old when they bought it, when they got it. So this is in the 1720s, so it was before that. So they were heiresses, and the family owned this pharmacy. Now, they were the last two to inherit. Some of us have been talking about this. How can men inherit women's ancestral lines and titles? Well, when there are no men to inherit the title, rather than have the property go out of the family completely, they will transfer all of those titles and privileges to the men of the daughters who were the last heirs of a fortune. And then at least then their children will inherit it. So then that way it keeps it in the family. It doesn't get lost. So they married two Parolari sisters. I'm not going to go into the whole history because I have it all written down, and it'll be in the paper that I go upload. They inherited this pharmacy. The pharmacy stayed in the family for at least a few hundred years, and it finally kind of died out I think around the beginning of the 20th century, actually, and then it was transferred to another family. The pharmacy itself operated until like about 1980, believe it or not, but it belonged to these Alimonta who were from Fiave, but actually by this time they had shifted to Campo LOMASO, which is just a short jaunt away, to manage the pharmacy, okay? So they came from Lombardia, went down to Garda, up to Arco, and then to Fiave, and then just a short jaunt over to Campo LOMASO. Now, the children of the other brother, or if he was a brother, Antonio, and I'm descended from a female in that line, they pretty much stayed in Fiave, and most of the descendants, all of the descendants in Fiave are going to be from one of these two brothers, men, probably Antonio. And however, two of those sons went somewhere else. They went up to Spiazzo was it Spiazzo? It's in Val Rendena anyway. I can't remember if it was actually Spiazzo. I think it was a different village. But they went up to Val Rendena, okay? So if you have Alimonta in Rendena, you are definitely related to the Alimonta in Fiave, definitely, because we know that they went up toward the end of the 1700s up to Rendena. So they made this big loop. So this family got around. They spread all over the place. There's some books say they came to Rendena directly from Lombardia. It's not true. If you look at the records, it just isn't true. They came this way, and it makes much more sense because they went down around the lake and then up, and then there they are. So if you've got Alimonta from Rendena, it means you are related to the ones from Fiave who originally came from Lombardia and stopped on the way in Arco. So there you go. Your family got around. Okay, so the next family that I want to talk about, and this will please a few of you because I know a lot of you have this family in your history, are the Benigni. How many of you have Benigni? My guess is that a lot of you do if you come from the southern part of the province. Now, Benigni is really interesting because I've seen a lot of different theories. One historian believes that they were originally from Toscana, specifically Florence, Firenze, and because apparently one of the Benigni lines in the Giudicarie has the same stemma as one of the Florence lines in Toscana. Now, I haven't seen the evidence of this. I haven't seen any pictures. I haven't done any of that. I just read that somebody theorized it, so don't repeat me. I don't know if it's true, but if it is, that would be very interesting that they came up from Toscana into the southern part of Trentino at some point. But anyway, forgetting that, that's simply a theory, forgetting that, we know that the Benigni are really old in that part of the province. In fact, we theorize that they went back to somebody named Benino, that the name Benigni means of Benino. And there was a man named Benino of Gavazzo, which is near Tenno, which is down, if you've seen Lago di Tenno, again, it's in more the southern part of the province, above Arco and that area. It's a really beautiful lake around that area. So Benino of Gavazzo, he lived a long time ago. So if they did come from Toscana, it was ages ago. He was there in the 1300s, so 1350s, and he was a notary. So now we think, we're not sure, that perhaps all the Benigni came from him. But this is, again, a theory. It's tough. And I haven't researched his family in depth, but that's a theory. That's one theory. What we do know is that at some point there was also a Benigno Benigni in Fiave. And that was about 200 years later. So if we look at the map and we see Gavazzo and Tenno kind of down here, Fiave is really not that far. It's a jaunt, but it's not terribly far. It's further north in Val Giudicarie, in Giudicarie Interiore. So now we think that was the line of progression. Okay, now there's still lots and lots of Benigni down in that Tenno area. I've done a lot of trees for you, some of you who have family in that area. But the Benigni and Fiave are really prominent. And many theories say that they came from Arco originally, that there are two branches. One came from Arco, one maybe came from Gavazzo, I don't know, but one definitely came from Arco. In fact, the person I just mentioned, the Benino Benigni, he is already identified as having come from Arco. Now, Arco, again, is not that far from Gavazzo, so it's all in that southern area of the province. So Benino, the one in the 1500s, who was a notary, it says that he came from the plain of Arco, and he settled in Fiave sometime before 1580. So we don't know these from the parish records. We know these from notary documents and things like that. So anyway, they again were rural nobility, possibly early nobility from Toscana, but that is a theory, and I'm not going to go into it. Okay. Now, let's look at the family in Fiave. What's interesting about this family is that two other branches emerged from them. One of them is, one other branch emerged from them. One of them became, now you say it the same way, but in Trentino, I've heard people say it differently, became the Benigni of Seo, which I know Mary Kay Sheely has written a book about them. They say Benigni, or the same, but in Trentino, a lot of people will say it differently because it has a G in it, Benigni, like that, Benigni. But the Benigni of Seo were originally from the Fiave Benigni, and I traced them. They come from a man named Simone Andrea Benigni, who was Oh, actually, I'll tell you who he was in a little while. He was the the great grandson of somebody I'm going to talk about in a minute, of a man named Andrea Benigni and a woman whom I'm going to mention in the next section, because that's kind of where I'm going. I kind of did this in alphabetical order. I should have done it the other way around. But anyway, so he's the great grandson of someone else I'm going to talk about in the next section. He transferred to Seo when he married a Parisi woman, a woman named Domenica Margherita Parisi, in 1776. For some reason, the priests started to write the names differently back then. They wrote the name, instead of B-E-N-I-N-I, they wrote the B-E-N-I-G-N-I, Benigni, like that. And I don't know why. And it stuck. So if you have descendants, or if you have ancestors, not descendants, if you have ancestors who were Benigni, however you want to say it, of Seo, which is in the parish of Tavodo, still in Val Giudicarie, but in the other half of it, they came from Fiave too. All right? So they came from Fiave, and the Fiave family originally came from Arco. So your family got around. Now, if you had Benigni family in Bevedo, or Santa Croce del Village, which is, I'm descended from them, they actually came from a different place, believe it or not, but still may have harkened back to that Benino back in the 1300s. They're descended from somebody who came from Rancone. And I have to look up the name because it's not fresh in my mind. He's another Antonio. He came from Rancone around 1600, around the year 1600. Around 1640, so probably just after the plague of 1630. A lot of people shifted around after the plague. So he came from Rancone, which isn't that far, again, from that whole Tenno ere. It's kind of around the mountain, but it's, again, in that same general part of the province. So if you're descended from Benigni in Santa Croce, well, your family came from Rancone down further south in the province. So your family went places. Okay, your family got around also. Here's an interesting piece of trivia. A few years ago, I was researching my great-grandmother, my grandmother's mother, who didn't come from Trentino. She came from the province of Verona, from a place called Badia Calavena in the province of Verona. Now, they haven't digitized their records. They're not in any archives. They're just books in the parishes, and they're, not in very good repair. So I wanted to research my family. So I wrote to the parish priest there. And what was interesting, and I explained to him that I've done a lot of research in Santa Croce and stuff like that. And he said his name he's retired now, but he's still there, still in the town. His name was Giuseppe Benigni. And he said, oh, it's interesting. My father came from Santa Croce. I said, oh, really? And he said, yeah, he said he was a little older when I was born, and he moved here around such and such time. And I said, what are your grandparents' names? Since he gave me his grandparents' names. And lo and behold, they were on my Santa Croce tree. And I knew already that since he was a Benigni from Bevedo, from Santa Croce, the parish, that we were cousins. The priest and I were cousins. I knew we had to be, because I know we're all descended from the same guy who came there in 1640, the guy from Rancone. So the next letter I wrote to him was an 84-page pedigree chart. And he said, oh my goodness. When I went to Badia Calavena, he gave me like the key to the city practically. I had free reign of the archives. I got to stay in the bishop's room in the monastery. They gave me all my meals. It was pretty amazing. But anyway, it was because I knew I had traced the family back to a certain point, and I knew that he had to be a cousin. I said, we're sixth cousins. It's not much of a cousin, but to Italians, they don't consider that to be really cousins, but I do. Anyway, he was impressed, and so that was kind of cool. So that's just some trivia. The next family I'm going to mention, and this is kind of off the wall, and you might not imagine this family has any connection with Fiave whatsoever. And again, I will relate it back to something that I said I would a minute ago. This is the Pancari family. Now, how many of you have Pancari in your tree? My guess is lots and lots and lots and lots of you. Why? Because I've done lots and lots and lots of trees for lots of you in the group who have Pancari in your family. Now, just a brief overview. The Pancari got around too, but mostly in the northern part of the province. Gene Pancari, as you know, has been doing a study on the Pancari for a long time, and he believes in, through research, and I'm helping him with it, as is Andrea Poya, who goes by the name of Pancari in the group. It is assumed that all the Pancari are descended from somebody named Pancaro, because Pancaro is such an unusual name. It doesn't pop up in other families. It really is quite, I won't say unique, but not common. So, and Pancari means of Pancaro, all right? So it's assumed that all the Pancari are descended from Pancaro before the use of surnames, sometime in the early 1300s. They originate in Semiclavo, okay, in Val di Sole. So that's where they came from originally. You start to see the name diversify. They did go places, but they kind of, what makes it difficult with them is some of them go places and then come back, and then go another place and then come back. And so trying to trace them because they did that a lot, they zigzagged around a lot, and also because there's an awful lot of missing records, gaps in records and missing records in the early period. It's been tough, and so we've had to cross-check a lot of things. Anyway, to give you an idea of where they went, start in Semiclavo, then around, so that's in the 1300s. You see them there, or Pancaro there. Then around in the 1500s, you start to see them appear possibly in Bresimo, or indeed Castel Alta Guardia. Some of them were officers there, various jobs in the castle, working with the Counts of Thun, which is very interesting. There's a lot of history there. Then they start to appear in Romalo, in the parish of Revo, which is in Val di Non. So it's a little bit further away. And that's where you start to see them kind of bounce around. Some of them had property here, but they lived here, and they went there and started in one place and ended up in another, or maybe in 2-3 different places. That's made it difficult to trace some of them. But anyway, they got around. They were affluent, they had property, and they had friends in high places, it seems. Then in the 16 to 1700s, you start to see them branch out a little more in places like Claise and Gis and Bozzana and Borgiana. Now, Fiave, you say? That's all the way over here if you're looking at a map, because all these other places are up here. Yes, randomly, out of nowhere. And this is when I was doing a tree for, again, Mary K. Sheely on the Benigni line. Randomly, I found a marriage record for an Antonio Benigni. What year was it? In 1640, I think. No, 1683. I found a marriage record for an Antonio Benigni and a Maria Pancari, daughter of Paolo Pancari of Val di Non. It doesn't say where in Val di Non. It's driving us crazy because we can't find a Paolo anywhere. He also died in Fiave. So I've got this marriage record and I've got this death record. So both say Paolo Pancari from Val di Non. I think it kind of infers that Maria may have also been born in Val di Non too. Doesn't say anything about what he did. There's an 80-year gap in the birth records, so I can't find any other information. There are no other children who either came with him or survived. certainly no other sons. That name appears never again in Fiave. Never again. Maybe today, but not, not before the modern era. I've never, ever, ever seen it in Fiave or Vigo LOMASO or that whole area, ever. I did find a random Pietro visiting Priore, but it doesn't say he lived there. This is a man who lived there in the late 1600s. What was he doing there? Who is he? Where did he come from? That's one of the things we're going to try to figure out. So that family got around. I have no idea what he was doing there. Anyways, so let me, and they, that Antonio and Maria, are Mary Kay's ancestors. So they're like her 7 times great-grandparents or something. So it means that she's related to the Pancari. And if all the Pancari are descended from Pancaro, then she's descended from one of them too. So anyway, they got places. Now the last one I'm going to talk about tonight is a very interesting family called the Zambotti. Now, how many of you have Zambotti? I'm sure a lot of you have Zambotti. Z-A-M-B-O-T-T-I or Z-A-M-B-O-T-T-I, depending on where you live. The Zambotti are very interesting. I like researching them because I find them to be a very colorful family. They are such an iconic family of Fiave. They are strongly associated with Fiave. But the thing is, they're not from there. Like none of these other families are either that I've mentioned tonight. Zambotti did not come from Fiave. They came originally from Vermiglio, up north again. Vermiglio and Val di Sole. Anyway, they came from Vermiglio. And they shifted, they arrived in Fiave. We know they came from Vermiglio because there is a marriage record from, let me look at the year. I have to look at the year. Right, 1659. So again, this is like, again, post, this is the generation after the plague. And a lot of people shifted around then. So there was a man named Giovanni Crescenzio Zambotti. Crescenzio, again, a really unusual name. And the marriage record says he married a noble lady who was actually from Caldes, but they were both in Fiave at the time, which I find interesting. Noble lady Domenica Zonta. And they married in 1659. And it says that he was from Vermiglio. It says that. Now, the problem is, at the time that he was married or born, there's again a gap in the Vermiglio records, about a 13-year gap. His birth record doesn't exist. However, there are some other children who may be his siblings because there is a Crescenzio, and again, that's such an unusual name. There is a Crescenzio in Vermiglio having children at that time. So maybe his father, we're theorizing that it's his father, but again, it's one of those things where we don't know for sure unless we get a little bit more information. Nonetheless, we know that they didn't come from there. They moved to Fiave. They did not come from there. They were from Vermiglio. We also know there was another Zambotti branch that was around at the same time in blah, 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 blah. Where did they cut? Who were a noble? No, that's a little later. I'll tell you those in a minute. Anyway, so the Zambotti were really, really, really prolific in Fiave, and they had a lot of notaries. And so you see them as notaries. They're referred to as nobility quite frequently. I'm not going to go into the whole history of them. However, they got around too. So they weren't just Vermiglio to Fiave. One branch, and I have to look it up because I actually asked my friend Jim Calla this because I didn't remember. And this branch, I believe, is related to a lot of you who have Castelfondo and relatives. One branch, one son, one descendant of Crescenzio, named Bartolomeo Antonio, who was born in 1715. He moved up to Castelfondo, and he married a Maria Paternoster from Castelfondo and settled there. Now, all of their descendants are therefore related to the ones in Fiave. So if you've got Zambotti from Castelfondo in Val del Non, so the family kind of made a big loop like this. If you've got Zambotti from Castelfondo in Val d'Anon, you are related, definitely related, no further than 300 years back or so, 300 years back, I'd say 250 years back, to the Zambotti in Fiave. Definitely, because we know exactly the point of entry. So your family got around. So there we go. I talked about 4 families tonight. Let's go back through them again. Started with the Alimonta, who went from Lombardia down to Arco, and then up to Fiave, and then up to Rendena, right? And then I did the, hold on, let me look at the notes. I have to remind myself, the Benigni, who may be from Toscana, but I doubt it. Maybe, who knows? We don't know. Who started down from the Tenno and Arco area and moved upwards to into Fiave, and then a branch going into Seo, changing their spelling of their name, and another branch coming from Rancone down there going into Bleggio, which don't seem to be related, but may all go back to the Benigno back in the 1300s. Don't know. The Pancari, who started in Val di Sole and then branched into Val d'Anon, and then one weird branch went down to Fiave and disappeared. And then finally the Zambotti, who started in Vermiglio, came down to Fiave, and a branch went up to Castelfondo. So your family's got around. And moreover, if you have families in these branches, you're probably related to others who have these families. And some of them definitely, like I said, if you have Zambotti from Castelfondo, you're definitely related to anybody else who has Castelfondo Zambotti, because we know they came from one particular ancestor. Anyway, that's it for tonight. Next time, I'll talk about some other families. And if you have any questions about this, let me know. And I hope that you found this interesting. It's hard to explain it all without showing everything, but I attempted to tell it in a kind of a narrative way, so it wasn't just dates and whatever. And I hope you see how interesting it is to look at the way people moved around. I find it interesting how many people moved after the plague in 1630. That's something I'm always interested in. I think that I think people do tend to shift around because economies shift. Inheritances shift, things become available, things become not available. And I think it's very interesting to see how in the generation after the plague of 1630, there's a lot of movement in the province, kind of like shaking up a snow globe, until things kind of settle down again. So after things like plagues, certainly wars, you see a lot of movement, but that's just my theory. So anyway, okie dokie. I hope you enjoyed that, and I will definitely see you the first Friday of next month. I can't remember what that is. Let's see. So that would be the first Friday of September, which looks like it's the 4th of September. Okay, so I'll see you then. I'll try to keep in mind. I'll be thinking. I have 2 families already lined up, but I'm trying to get them from different places, and I'm trying to get themes together. So I'll put some other information together for you then. Okay, take care. Bye bye. Ciao ciao.